Guys, welcome back to the show. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm joined in studio with Jose Shorty Torres, eight-time mixed martial arts champion, former Titan fighting champion, flyweight champion. I mean, the list is endless. All the titles you have under your your belt, under your belt. But look, how you doing? How you think? How is everything?
I'm great, brother. I can't complain. I'm just fat and happy since the fight and down back in Mexico City helping train Lazy Boy for his fight for UFC Mexico March 29th. So using it to get back in shape, but back to the grind as usual and waiting until the next fight.
Your fights, your last fight, which was Ryzen 49. How how was I mean it was great performance and you came on top, you came out the winner. But your post-fight press conference thing, you said that despite your win, you said that the way that your opponent was with you in the octagon there, that he was almost like was surprising you all the time. But you did also mention a lot that he's still very young and up and coming. So for you, you kind of like you expect that from someone who is still very much very fresh and young in the game.
Yeah, something I talked about before the fight too is that was his biggest strength and weakness. His biggest strength was he's young, he's crazy. I mean, you remember the stuff we used to do as kids, and we know we can still do them now, but we're like, oh, that's kind of dangerous. Like we could probably get hurt, or it's very reckless. Where we become cautious as we get older. For him, he's still young, crazy, wild, free. And I see his fights. He starts very fast. He does these sporadic movements where you're like, you just don't expect it. You don't expect the average fighter to do something crazy like that. It's like Justin Gaethje doing a Rolling Thunder. Like you never expect him to do it, but he's gonna do it. So the crazy thing with that was I always had to be on guard. But I knew no matter what he threw at me, once I got past the first surprise, my experience was going to come into play and go, cool. After this, it's the same thing as we all have done, but I've done it longer than you. And hopefully at that point, I've done it much better. And the fight, I was able to prove that no matter what position he got me in, even when he was able to take my back and he's trying to do certain things, there was no fear or expression of fear on my face. I'm just kind of like, okay, well, I'm gonna get out. Like I know I'm gonna get out. It might take me a little longer than I want to, but I'm gonna get out and we're gonna fight again and everything's gonna be fine. That's why the third round, he moved a lot more. He tried to do sporadic things and do knee bars and different submissions, and he just kind of went for broke because after his wild and recklessness, and obviously the experience didn't work out in his favor, he's like, all right, I'm just throwing everything at him. Let's see what I can catch. But at that point, the experience really comes into play. It's like, oh, this is the part I expect, and this is how I know I can get out. So, I'm excited because even after the fight, we talked in person, and he's like, "Were you nervous about any of the stuff?" I'm like, "No. I mean, I know you hit hard and all these things. I mean, I've been fighting at bantamweight, so I'm a little more accustomed to the bigger guys." But then two, I wasn't fearful of anything for the most part. Obviously he put me in certain positions, but I wasn't afraid. And I go, he tells me, he goes, man, well, one day I hope you're in this flyweight Grand Prix because I hope to rematch you and I'm gonna beat you. I go, well, if it's this year, no offense, man, I don't think you're gonna beat me, but I hope one day you get to the level where you can beat me because I'm 32, he's 24. If he's that good at 24 years old, dude, kudos to you. Like, congratulations, that is amazing. I could just imagine once you get to my age, if you're alive and healthy and well. So keep on training. One day you will beat me, but right now, at least today, I'm the victor. Maybe next time we fight, it might be a little bit different, but today I was the better man, and I'm excited you had some type of motivation that pushes you to get better.
You speaking with your opponent after the fight, even though you did win. I mean, he himself, he didn't feel like any kind of animosity or envy. Because I'm sure as a young fighter, he still probably believes he has to prove himself to a lot of people in the fight game as he works his way up the ranks and so on. I mean, do you even see yourself possibly inviting him to train at your gym sometime in the future?
We, it's funny, right after the fight, Lazy Boy invited him to come train with us down in Mexico, which again, I look at it this way. All the top fighters in the world that I've even offered to fight, just because I respect them a lot and I know how good they are. So it's more of an honor fight of like, dude, you guys help create my legacy. It's not because I don't like you or whatever. Our sport, and again, it's just a sport. It so happens that we have to punch each other in the face. Yeah, I've trained with Kyoji Horiguchi before for 2 years, Patchy Mix for 2 years, um, Joseph Benavidez when he was still in his prime, D.A. Dillashaw, all these high level guys that I was hoping to fight one day, and even some of the guys that are still in the prime. Um, it's this is just part of the game. So I say, why not help each other grow? And then maybe once we get to a certain point, that championship level, a contender fight, or for the belt, that's when it matters most. Mike Tyson has a quote, and given I'm summarizing, it's the same interview he did where he's like, "Oh, I broke my back." Like the same exact interview. The guy he ended up knocking out that day was one of his really good friends. And that friend was having some financial difficulties and called Mike Tyson and goes, "Hey man, um, and I really need money right now. Can we fight? Can we make a big event? I'll trash talk, I'll do whatever. We can make a huge event because Mike Tyson had a name." And Mike Tyson said, "I wouldn't be a friend if I said no. I know this guy is struggling to have money. He's struggling to do this. Yeah, cool. Let's punch each other for 36 minutes at most. And after that, he's financially better. I have a friend because I said yes. Yeah, sure, I got to hit him, but we'll take a few hits and make a few $1 million. Or for us, at least as May fighters, we'll take a few hits to possibly change our lives." So, yeah, man, it's just a sport. So everyone takes it too personal. So for my opponent to be coming up to me and talking to me respectfully after the fight, even asking questions and advice, was it shows how much he's willing and wanting to grow.
That's really something quite, how do I put it into words, quite profound or so, that Mike Tyson was still willing to take that risk to be embarrassed or to come out the victor in something, just so he can help out his good friend financially. I mean, that is what you call a true friend. They were happy to just go through a bit, some nasty stuff just so they can see you do a bit better. Um, but no, I mean, I bring that up because in the past, when something like this does happen, both sides, especially the person that loses the fight, they don't take it too well. And the same thing goes to
Yeah.
some fight fans. I mean, I've seen at some of your past bouts. I think it was one back when you were in Brave or so. I can't remember the guy's name, but when they introduced you as a second fight. They introduced him probably because he's fighting on home turf. But when they introduced you and then while you're both standing in the octagon there, you got a lot of booing from from the crowd. I was like, wow, seriously?
Yeah, I think that was Amir Albazi, and I fought in
Yes,
Jordan.
yes.
Um, I'm the only American to really fight in different countries, at least in the Middle East. So when I went to Jordan, I'm in very, very hostile territory. For people who don't know, at least, in the Middle East and US, because of all the wars that have happened from the 80s and 90s, 2000s, and now. Um, Americans just in general, and sadly, it's the leaders, not the Americans themselves, but the leaders, are taking advantage of certain countries and the Middle East fight back, and so there's always bad propaganda between both. And I remember that day, I go, man, let me not walk out with my American flag, because they might look at it as disrespect. They might look at it as another American coming over to try to take over, or whatever the case may be. So. I'm like, all right, let me just walk out, as normal and fight. And I won. And in between the whole thing, before the fight, everyone's booing me, boo, American, blah, blah, blah. Doesn't even matter if my name's Jose or whatever. And during the fight, you start to respect someone, even if you are supporting the guy from, their home turf. Yeah, you want to support the home fan, but you're always going to respect another player that puts on a performance. You're like, man, regardless if he wins or loses, he's putting on a show for us because that's what they paid to see. It's a show. Doesn't matter where I'm from. And then after the fight, I win the fight, and the first thing I say is, Assalamu alaikum, thank you to everyone, or, all my people. And because I put in again my small 2 cents of speaking their language, speaking their religion, or showing off their religion and showing my respect back, especially as an American, they were like, man, this guy put on a show. He was willing to come this far in hostile territory. And he's going out of his way to learn different customs to at least show us a small hint of respect back. Like, man, we like him. And then after the fight, they're like, man, everyone was shaking my hand, everyone was congratulating me. So it was a very, very cool thing. Again, that's Just like anything, no matter where you're from, you're always going to support the home team. You're always going to boo the other guy. It's an intimidation factor. The Muhammad Ali mental warfare. Like you need that sometimes to win a fight or to better win a fight. But the fact is, no matter what, it's a sport. And if I perform well enough, no matter where I'm from and no matter what country I'm going to, hostile territory or not, hopefully win or lose, after the fight, you respect me that much more because you understand that to me, it's just a sport, and worse is worse, you enjoyed my performance.
How was the fight camp for your latest bout, Ryzen 49? I just have to check. Was it, did you have to make weight drastically, or was it, how was the whole experience overall for this particular fight?
Well, it was very, very different because I ended up doing my very first camp for myself in Mexico City. I lived with my coach here, Miguel Gonzalez, and I had him also, in a sense, be my dietitian and cook for me. So, I was like, man, whatever, because this is my first time dropping back down to a catch weight of 59 kilograms and eventually going back down to 57 kg, the flyweight division. So I was like, if you're gonna be my dietitian and feed me, or cook for me and feed me, make me whatever you want. I'll be as disciplined as you want. If you make me the same thing every single day, then so be it. As long as it's right and I'm losing weight and I feel good, let's do it. And so we did that, and then Lazy Boy was able to help me, find sponsors, find gyms to train at, taking advantage of the UFC Performance Institute here in Mexico City, and doing a lot of things. And we were able to find a bunch of bodies that were willing to help me, and especially because I have a resume here, I am Latino, and I'm also an American. Being able to come down here, they know that if they train with me, especially a lot of fighters, they're going to learn from me. And I'm always for sure willing to help. So a lot of the guys would come out of their way, sometimes even miss work just to come train with me. I was like, oh, this is cool. So I think this was the most supportive camp that my last one that I've ever received. And I was jacked, dude. I was ripped. I was cut. I was lean, and I was very, very healthy, especially going down to an old weight class that I wasn't excited to go back down to. I thought it was going to be, in a sense, a more, rigorous or painful process. But given there's always a small sign of pain when you do a weight cut, but regardless, it was very, very easy. That made me very confident in going back down to the flyweight division. So when it came to the camp, it was awesome. The only hard part is trying to get things a little bit organized at the start. And then two is the altitude here in Mexico City. It's one of the highest points in the world. So it becomes very, very difficult to acclimate. It takes you 2, 3 weeks depending on how your training is and how hard you train. So this is actually my first week back helping Lazy Boy. And dude, and I'm like fat and happy. So I'm like, oh, I feel more out of shape than I probably really am. So it's a process, but man, my last camp was fun, and we'll see what the next camp brings. Maybe I'm back here in Mexico City. Maybe I split half the camp and I do half here, half in Mexico. Because in Tokyo, at least if I do fight there again, there's not much altitude. So, I'm at sea level for the most part. So, I don't need the altitude training, but I also obviously enjoy it. It gives me an advantage, and we'll see. Hopefully, I could just get to fly a little earlier instead of a day and a half before the fight, because I was still very, very jet lagged inside the fight, which wasn't fun, but it's a process that I went through and obviously overcame. But the last camp was dope, man. Thank you for asking.
Jose, it is the first time of me speaking to you, and as I do with every other fighter and anyone affiliated with combat sports, can you please just give a bit of a backstory on your background and how you got into mixed martial arts?
Yeah. The my lifestyle has been very, very different. My dad was a gang leader. I grew up in a trap house. We sold drugs, all that stuff. So the rules for me in my childhood was very, very different. And people weren't able to know my name, or we weren't really able to take pictures. We weren't able to tell people where we lived or have people over the house because we sold drugs. So, or at least my dad sold drugs. So the fact was, and my dad was very aggressive. So it was either I played with him, like play fighting, or he beat me up because he was angry and I just so happened to be in the way. So no matter what, I had to learn how to defend myself, especially since my brother was 8 years older. Sometimes you get bullied and you're gonna have to learn how to defend yourself. And my mom kind of saw the energy that I was putting, especially watching shows like, in the 90s, there was Dragon Ball Z, Power Rangers, WWF back in the day before it was changed with the Attitude Era and Stone Cold. She was like, man, he had a lot of energy. Let's not put him in the streets like everyone else in the family. Let's put him inside the gym and let's keep him there. Let's force him to stay inside the gym and use that energy for good. But for me, I eventually learned how to fight, joined different gyms, and I just started to win. Um, to where when I became when I turned 18, I started amateur MMA, became the first ever two-time amateur world champ. And then from there went pro and won multiple world titles from there. It was a very, very surprising thing, but I grew up in a very different way. I grew up not wanting to fight. I'm not a person that enjoys fighting. I'm like Gohan, or I'm like Team Gohan in the Cell Saga. I'm a person that doesn't like to fight. I just so happen to be really good at it. It's just not my thing. I'm a gentle person at heart. So even in fights, I'm like, oh, dude, I don't want to do this, at certain times because I'm like, oh man, he's in a vulnerable position. But um, again, like I said, the older we get, the more cautious we become. But for me, I fought because my father wanted me to. My mom put me in the gym because that was the best way to use my energy and to keep me safe from my neighborhood and just even sometimes the people around me. My brother motivated me to not be like him and keep on pushing me forward so I can stay inside the gym and off the streets. So for me, that was my biggest reason why I started fighting. So I started training at 4 years old, and now it's 28 years on. I'm a multiple world champion, and I get to travel the world because of it.
I I have heard one of your past interviews that you're no, this is not you didn't mean this in a negative way. You actually meant it in a positive way. And the thing it adds to what you just explained here. Um, that your father growing up, he did kind of deliberately neglect you just to make sure that you kept away from that life and you stayed on the straight and narrow path or so.
Yeah, man. That's the crazy thing when you start to learn more things about your parents, whether you resent them or they hit you or whatever past mistakes. I mean, I'm not a parent that I know of. I don't think I have kids, but the fact is you want to give your kids a better life than what you had, and I'm pretty sure that you are trying to make the best decisions possible. Are they always going to be the best decision? No. But at the time, you made the best decision or choice that you thought was right for them and even for yourself at times. So, with my mom, obviously there were certain things she tried her best because I was more a mama's boy. She kept me away from my father on purpose. My dad, he goes, man, as much as I love my son and I want him to be like me and do this and do that, I want him to be a fighter. Um, I know if he's gonna be around me more, and same thing with my brother. They both said if they're around me more, or if he's around me more, then he's gonna eventually be like us. Eventually they're gonna be what does a son want to be? He wants to be just like his father. Or he wants to be just like the big brother, the role models. That's what they look up to. So they're trying to be molded into that or mold themselves into it. So my dad purposefully neglected me on purpose. He goes, hey man, I don't want you around me. Not because I don't love you. It's just I know you're gonna be like me and I do a lot of bad stuff and I don't want you to follow the same path. This life is a lot harder than you getting beat up and training every single day and doing these other things. Like yeah, that's still hard, but just imagine a different life of gangs, drugs, always worrying about your life and always worrying about the lives of people around you. So it becomes a very, very, scary thing. But that was one thing I had to slowly realize, but also because of martial arts. I was able to be in front of very, very positive male role models that I was like, man, no matter if I want to be like them or not, you're around them all the time. Eventually you start, becoming like them, repeating their mannerisms and all that stuff. So I eventually became a lot like my coach, and which honestly was for the better. And obviously, I have those small little sprinkles of my father, my brother, and obviously of my mother because I was raised by her. So it is a crazy thing to realize, because most of the time your parents don't tell you why they did certain things. They just like, we're just gonna let it go. We don't want to bring up old traumas or old history or past things, but it's you now as an adult to be able to realize those things and go, you know what, man, your job is to give your kids a better life than what you had, even if it is 1% better compared to the life that you really wanted. Worse was the worst. You could have had their life. And no offense to some of the parents, and especially mine, they didn't have the best lives. So 1% better, dude, I'll take it. Thank you. And hopefully I'm able to do the same thing back. Given my parents gave me a much better life than 1% better than theirs. But that's just my example of worst of the worst, job well done. And you move on from there and then hopefully be able to heal from whatever childhood neglect or trauma that you had to deal with and really understand why that happened in the first place. And I think understanding is easily the hardest thing to do, but the best thing to do once you open yourself up to the opportunity of figuring stuff out so you can better heal and again raise your kids hopefully a little bit better.
You know, for a mixed martial arts fighter, for your hair and your overall appearance, you speak very, very well, very candidly and clear. You're one of the rare fighters in the sports of in combat sports, so forth, that you come across quite articulate. And um, one of the questions I do ask fighters I've interviewed before in the past is have they thought about starting a podcast? But you, of course, you do have one. I ask that because from the conversation that I'm having with them, from the interviews that I've had before in the past. They do have a lot of good, thoughtful, interesting, quality things to say, and I do think that people, even outside of combat sports, will listen to that and use it in their life. Um, but you have your own podcast. I mean, overall, I mean, how are things going with that?
Um, so I have two podcasts. I have Small Talks with Shorty Torres on MMA Unhinged, and I have the Shorty Show, which is filmed live in a studio in Vegas. The hard part about both is, you have to rely on people, and then the one in person is I also have to be there. So for me, because I travel so much, I know we filmed one episode after my fight. I believe this was actually last week. um, I went to Vegas. I was like, hey man, Justin is my co-host and my producer. I go, hey man, do we have time for at least one episode? Kind of a recap of my fight, and then that's it. Because you have to be there in person. And right now, I know I'm in Mexico City for this is the crazy thing with my life. Mexico City for a month and a half. Then I go back to Chicago for 3 days. I go to Norway for a military trip, back to Chicago, back to Mexico City, and then we'll see what happens from there. And that's in the span of 2 months. Literally, from my fight, the month of January, I was in Tokyo, Chicago, Vegas, Texas, and Mexico in a month, So some of them only for like 3 days. So for me, I travel so much, so having a studio in person is amazing, and it's so much more fun. It's better. There's, you see the live expressions and have a great time, but I have to be there. So that's the hard process. But hopefully we get to really promote the videos that we have and maybe start monetizing on YouTube. So that's a process, and it is a very, very hard process, especially I know I'm going on a rant, a little bit of tangent, but in the US everyone is competing with each other. So most of my fans, coincidentally, are either, hardcore fans from the US or outside the US because they respect what I have to say and they want to hear the different voices. But at least in my country, it's the land of opportunity. So if you're competing with me, nah, I'm good. It becomes a fight. So it becomes very, very difficult to get a lot of support, even at times from your own city. Again, there's a difference between talking and actions, so it becomes very, very different when people say they want to support a podcast. But the one on MMA Unhinged is a lot of fun. But we both have to be free. My co-host, Luke, we have to be free. He has a life. I obviously have a life getting punched in the face, and we're both traveling everywhere. It's so much easier to do it online and so much faster. But then I also have to, rely on him and even just the company in general when they have time to edit the stuff. We can shoot 20 episodes, but as you already know, sometimes it takes some time to edit the intro, the outro, even cuts in between, depending on how you want the podcast to be. And then also posting it and promoting it. So it becomes a very, very difficult thing. So it's a process. I think, but anyone who wants to do a podcast, do it. Why not? Even look at some of the most popular people on TikTok. Even if it is a 2 minute, 3 minute video, just film it. If you have something to say, film it and post it. It doesn't have to be professional. Look at Keith
Yeah,
Lee,
yeah,
an MMA fighter who's doing food reviews, who has like 8, 9 million followers, who does videos just like this in his car, taking selfies of him eating. Like, dude, that is amazing. So you don't need anything super professional. But me, I'm an MMA fighter who's getting busy and punched in the face. So it's like, hey man, I need someone to or people to help me and edit the stuff because I'm definitely not tech savvy and I don't have the patience for it right now. But overall it's a process. So hopefully it grows, man. Thank you.
yeah. You've got a lot of achievements under your belt. But what was it like transitioning from the UFC to Brave, and then from Brave, I think have you transitioned from Brave to Rising?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm still technically a brave fighter. I'm a
Okay.
brave athlete. They just, in a sense, gave me a small opportunity to go to RIZIN. Hopefully, I get to do the RIZIN Grand Prix as well. But we'll see. It becomes a little bit of a conflict of interest when Brave also has their flyweight Grand Prix coming up this year. But for me, the exciting fighters, at least in my favor, are in RIZIN. As long as RIZIN agrees with the Brave contract that I have with them, hey man, let's do it. I'm getting paid the same, so it's not like I'm going to a different promotion and getting paid more. I just want to fight bigger names. And right now, the only big name that Brave has, at least that helps motivate me a little more is Muhammad Mokaev. And I see him as a little brother. I train with him, I help him. Um, but we'll see with him, and Dana says they don't want him back, so I believe he will be sticking with Brave, for the foreseeable future. But again, we'll have to wait. But Ryzen has killed Horiguchi, um, and so many more fighters. I'm just blanking out the names, but so many more fighters that I'm like, dude, this would be so much fun to fight. Plus, fighting at Saitama Arena and all these places, and plus I'm an anime fan, so being in Tokyo in general is just like a small dude with purple hair. Which I just want to say. When I went to Tokyo, I wasn't the only guy with purple hair walking around. So I was like, oh my God, there's people like me because everyone loves anime there. So it was a good
Yeah.
time. But we'll see. I think the transition was a little bit different. Um, because at the time when I joined Brave, it was still a very, very new company. It was only about 3 years old, so they were still trying to figure things out. And when they go to different countries and collaborate with the promotions there, sometimes the production isn't as high. So yeah, they're trying to figure it out. And given the UFC's had almost, and I believe now, like 30 years of having so many events, more than 300 events, at the highest level, their production is amazing and one of the best in the world. But so going to Brave, yeah, it was a little bit different. Obviously, they're still, even still today, trying to grow to that production, even organization type of level. I can tell you one thing that I haven't seen in any other promotion so far is the UFC is probably the most organized promotion in the world. If they tell you, hey, you're gonna fight at 7:30, no matter what happens in the night, unless they tell you anything different, you are fighting at 7:30. So you know when something's gonna go. I've had fights for Brave, I've had fights for Titan, I've had even the fight for Ryzen, that sometimes they just go back to back. There's no commercial break, there's no intermissions, there's no schedule. So, in a sense, there's the order of fights, but if there so happens to be, 10 decisions, dude, your fight is in like 5 hours. Like it's gonna suck. And you're just there at the arena. Or if there's 10 knockouts, dude, your fight might be in an hour and a half. You're like, oh God, I gotta get ready, So it becomes a very different thing. UFC, that's one really, 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 I think, great quality that they have is like other promotions compete with them and with some other things, but when it comes to the organization type of level, dude, UFC's by far the best. But one thing I do have to say is Ryzen, their production level of their events is by far the best I've seen so far. And I mean, I've been with Lazy Boy at the Sphere. I've been with Lazy Boy here at UFC Mexico and coached other fighters in different UFC events and Brave and other promotions, the PFL and Bellator back in the day. But Ryzen, dude, the whole thing was like, if you ever watched like WrestleMania at like a WWE or WWF event, like WrestleMania is the biggest wrestling event for, wrestling fans. And there's fireworks, there's a show, there's intermissions, there's always something. And that I felt like a wrestler coming. I felt like Stone Cold Steve Austin running to the ring, because it was my turn to come in into the Royal Rumble. Like it was the production level was by far the best I've ever seen. And hopefully I can do that again.
Look, this is gonna be a bit of an awkward one to ask you, but
Yeah.
please forgive me. You fought in the UFC, um, but I mean, even though they're still managing to cling onto the throne of global dominance when it comes to mixed martial arts, and even in terms of the brand combat sports, worldwide, they've got that. I mean, when you mention some people, they know the UFC so well that they believe they've mistaken the sport of mixed martial arts. They've mistakenly called it UFC. That's how
Hmm.
well they're known in the game. Um, but for someone like you who was a fighter on the roster, let's say someone who could I say was also on the inside, what is it like being one of their fighters? I mean, how did you get in there? What the process, the procedure of signing into the organization, being signed up by them, and how they let you go? Because there are some fighters over here in the UK they're very well known here on the British scene and on the Irish scene. Um, they're very talented. They got titles upon titles beneath their belts, but for some reason the UFC haven't yet called them to sign up to fight on in their events. I mean, that's why I asked. I mean, what is it like exactly fighting it? Because at the same time now they've got a lot of competition. I'm guessing to some extent with PFL, there's one championship, and I'm sure. Do you know of Octagon MMA, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Hmm.
mean, Ariel Hawani's even called it Europe's secret in regards to mixed martial arts. I mean, I'm not sure how well they're known in the US, but I mean, just what is it like on the inside? What is it that someone like you would know about the UFC, but someone like myself, an outsider, would not know?
You know, the hardest part and something that I had to learn the hard way is, at least for me, I had a huge name going into the UFC, or at least my try my best to get into the UFC. I was 7-0, two-time world champ, or two division world champ, multiple defending in Titan FC, and then the first ever two-time IMMAF world champ. And the flyweight division wasn't super exciting at the time. So I'm like, dude, like sign me. I'm gonna bring the excitement back, you know. So it was a process, and I was always in a sense getting denied, denied, denied. Like, oh, you're not experienced enough, you're too young, you're not experienced enough. I'm like, okay, like, sure, I get it, fine. You know, I would get frustrated, but it is what it is. And then when it came to a point that I was to their level, um, I was receiving a lot of last minute calls, whether I was injured or out of shape, wasn't ready. I received, I believe, nine total last minute calls. So where they were for the most part, 10 days or less. And for me, I cut a lot of weight. MMA fighters do generally cut a lot of weight. So either it wasn't healthy for me to make the weight, or I was injured in the process of trying to make the weight. I remember I was supposed to be on Dana White's looking for a fight. I was supposed to be on a few shows that Dana was having that was trying to promote me more, kind of like a Sean O'Malley and certain things. But I ended up getting hurt in the process of trying to cut weight. And then I couldn't fight. So for me, my biggest mistake, and I guess even regrettable, is I wasn't ready. I wasn't training year round to be a MMA fighter. I was so used to being the prize fighter of Titan FC that I was like, oh, I have a fight in 2 months. Awesome. I have a 2 month training camp. Oh, I have a fight in 3 months. Cool. I still have a 2 month training camp, but I have a month to kind of ease into it. But the UFC, it's a convenience thing for them, you know, because they know everyone wants to join the promotion. They go, "Are you ready? No? Okay, cool. Next guy." Because there's always someone that's going to fight for cheaper. There's always someone that's going to, you know, jump when you say jump or when they say jump. So for them, it was a convenience thing. So uh and the way I got in was Jared Brooks was supposed to fight someone, and his opponent backed down. They're like, "Hey, you want to fight Jared Brooks in 9 days or 10 days at the time?" Because I waited a full day to officially say yes. I was like, no, dude, I gotta cut like almost 30 pounds at the time to make this weight. And then I ended up doing a workout and I got to 26 pounds over. I was like, all right, you know what? I will take the fight. I lost 26 pounds in 9 days. That's like, you know, 12, 13 kilo to lose in 9 days. It wasn't healthy. I really thought I was gonna end up in the hospital. And luckily I had a nutritionist to help me. But I ended up in the UFC because of a last minute call, given I was in a very different predicament because UFC was at the time contemplating what they wanted to do with the flyweight division. This is before they released, you know, Demetrius Johnson, all that stuff. Would it have been easier for me to enter the UFC if I was a lightweight or a heavyweight or something like that? Sure. But I was at flyweight where they're slowly cutting the division, so it became a lot more difficult for me. So I already started at like an unfair opportunity. But then after the Jared Brooks fight, I received another fight with a 20-day notice. And I was receiving ultimatums on taking the fight. Like, you can take the fight, but if you don't, then you won't fight until next year. And it's August, you know, and next year is in, you know, 4 or 5 more months. And especially with the UFC entry level contract, you don't make much money. So for me, I was like, man, I want to fight. But I can say after my first UFC fight, I'm like, "Ah, I'm a UFC fighter." Like when people are asking, hey, do you do UFC? I'm like, yes, you know what? I actually do UFC, you know? So that was the cool thing. Instead of saying, do you do MMA? Because everyone labels the UFC as MMA. Um, so I lost my last fight. I made videos talking just about mental health, different things, kind of how you and I are talking now. And Demetrius Johnson got traded to ONE FC. Long story short, I made a video about it, an assumption video, like, hey, I think they're going to start to cut the division because why would they keep us if they're giving away, you know, the UFC's best reigning champion And I ended up being right. And I believe because of that, given they said other things like, hey, you didn't perform well, we're gonna cut you, but this was months after the fight, I got released. And so when I got released, I was like, okay, well, it sucks, but I ended up signing with Brave and still flourishing in my career. But I tell any fighter is you have to be in shape. Most of the fighters that I know today, especially the Extreme Couture, they're just staying ready. And that's the best thing, the best advice I can tell you is stay 10 to 15 pounds overweight and try your best to stay in that window. If they call you in a week's notice, you still can make that weight. It's a little different for the people in the UK and the other side of the world because most of the shows are in the US. So for convenience, again, for them, they're going to fly someone that it's not international travel, it's not as expensive. It's faster for the athlete to get there, and they can cut the weight and perform a lot easier and better. But it is difficult for everyone in different countries of the world, the UK, anyone outside the US. I say, man, take those hard fights. Take those fights and go. Worst of the worst, even if I never make it to UFC, I can say I was Octagon champion, Aries champion, whatever other promotions champion, and I fought the best of the best. Even if that person made it to UFC because of political connections, and I didn't have those, I'm still fighting the best of the best. And again, if you do something for long enough. Look at Max Holloway, 12 straight wins. Tony Ferguson, 12 straight wins. All these guys, they had to fight everyone before they got the title shot. Then you have to force the UFC's hand to be like, damn, this guy's good. All right, well, we can't deny him any longer. Then let's bring him in. So I say, dude, take the hard fights. Don't play your career safely because the safe people will always stay in the back. Yeah, there's some, here and there again, political connections that will somehow get through. Hey, that's awesome. I'll give you that. But you got to work your way to it. And if you do it well enough, trust me, you're gonna force their hand and make them say yes. So that's the only advice I can say is stay ready, stay in shape, and take those fun, hard fights that's obviously at your level. But then if you think you are a UFC fighter, you're trying to say you're one of the best in the world, then show it beat the people in your regional promotion, be the Octagon champion, be again the Aries champion, all these, that's what I did with Titan. I go, all right, man, if the UFC is not going to call me, I'm going to bump up a division and fight the next weight class. And I did that. Even when I won and defended it at bantamweight, I go, dude, I'll bump up to featherweight. But from what I was told, the featherweight champ at the time denied the fight, so I didn't get the opportunity to fight another weight class. Me, I was just trying to create history. I was like, man, I'm gonna keep on forcing my hand and make the UFC sign me. And inevitably, whether it was last minute or not, I was on their radar, and they did.
So, you were saying you're just giving a bit of a brief background on the UFC and how you got in, then how the whole dynamic works. It's just that we over here there's a handful of fighters like I mentioned: Shamrock BJJ, Will Fleury, Luke Riley, Keith Keogh, Dennis Frimpong, Curtis Campbell. And they are very talented champion fighters over here in the UK and Irish scene. So many people have been gunning for them to be on the biggest stage in the world, the UFC. Um, but for someone like yourself, you're still very, very young, but you achieved so much. What advice would you give someone who's new to the scene and still working their way up the ranks?
The biggest thing if you're new to the scene and working your way up to the ranks is take those hard fights. The biggest thing, especially if you're at that pinnacle of can I be in the UFC or do I have the opportunity of being a champion in the different, regional promotions? Go to be a champion because the one thing that the UFC and other promotions in general like to see are accolades, a resume. They don't want to just see a guy who's 7-0 or, a big fish in a little pond. Go travel, go do different things, go fight people in Thailand and Russia and the UK and in the States and Brazil. For me, my biggest accomplishments were beating everyone from around the world. It wasn't because I was the best in Chicago and that was it. They called me because I was the best in Chicago. No, Chicago sometimes gets beat by California or Florida or all these different places. So I don't want to be a big fish in a little pond. I wanted to prove myself. And especially early in your career, I rather you see, losses early in my career and I grew from that compared to I'm at that level of can I be in UFC and maybe I take that easy fight, that quote unquote easy fight, and I lose. And then they see I lost to a fighter. Doesn't look good on my resume. If I lose, I want to lose to the champion. I want them to be like, man, this guy made it to UFC, or man, Shorty lost to this person and this guy's in the UFC now, or this guy's, a champion in a different promotion and he lost to the best. That's a notable and honorable loss. I rather see those types of defeats. So for me, take those fun fights, take those risky fights, also because at least again, everyone's different. I'm a person that if I'm afraid of an opponent, I'm gonna train that much harder. I'm gonna do so much more because I know the weapons and the arsenal they're gonna throw at me. I want to be afraid, and
Mm.
fear is a good thing. If you're not afraid going into a fight, you're gonna be too careless. I've had that in my first UFC loss. I didn't care anything about Alex Perez. I was going through a lot, and I was like, I'm careless, and I got beat up. And that was the first time and only time really that's ever happened to me. So the fact is, when you become careless and don't have any fear or anything against your opponent, you're not as motivated. So you need to train hard. You need to have that fear. And I think taking those fun fights and making a name for yourself, even if it is in your small pond, is a big thing because it's going to get other big fish to notice you.
You yourself, first me speaking to you about something, I have been asking other fighters, for someone as talented and successful as yourself, what is the one dream opponent you'd like to face and the one particular venue where you'd like the bout to be?
Um, I think I'm going to give you two answers. One, it's not going to happen anymore just because the person is retired. But Demetrius
Mm.
Johnson, he's one of the best UFC champions in history. Actually, right now, still today, I believe one of the best champions in UFC's history. I think he either had 10 or 11 title defenses. Like no one's had that. He's a phenomenal champion. Then he went overseas and won another belt and defended it. So for me to be able to compete against someone like that and just compare my skill one to be, man, I looked up to you fighting, a role model, but then two, comparing my skills against that role model, that would be, just a legendary thing in my head. But given it's only in my head, it's not going to happen anymore since he is retired. But a fun fight that would be really cool to have now is, and I've already called it out, is Kyoji Horiguchi. When I was at American Top Team, they compared us a lot to each other, and we got to train for 2 years against each other, and it was always back and forth, having a lot of fun. He has his strengths and weaknesses. I obviously have mine as well. So it was a fun mixture between both of our styles. And when we would have media days at the gym, people would stop watching everyone else's sparring and they would watch Kyoji and myself spar and just go at it with each other because it was just so fun. It was so fast paced and we hit hard, so it was exciting. So for me, I'd love to have that fight and in his home turf in Saitama Arena, like that thing was amazing. And seeing him being one of the main fights, the championship fights when I fought for RIZIN 49, um, it was cool, man. Him walking out the belt, the fireworks, all that stuff. I was like, one day I want to get to this in this arena and have the same respect factor that he has. Because I'm telling you, people were throwing everything at him because of how much they love and respect him. So for me, to fight Kyoji would be a great thing. Plus, we used to train together. So, like I talked about earlier, I do consider him as a friend. So it'd be a lot of fun to fight a friend at the highest level and say, dude, we made it. So it'd be cool for him to reach out, pick me up, and have me have us fight each other at the top, and whoever wins, wins. Again, it's not personal, it's just a sport. So I think that would be a very fun fight, hopefully happening soon for the Flyweight Grand Prix.
Last two questions. Next one is, has the next fight date been scheduled for yourself, or is it still in the works, or is it still too soon?
Sadly, I think it's still too soon. Not because I'm not ready to fight. I mean, given for sure I need a training camp, but um, the fact is, RIZIN and Brave are collaborating together to have me fight on one of their promotions, and they both have Flyweight Grand Prix. I want to be on one, but Brave technically has, legal control over me because I am contracted under them. So maybe I'm in the Flyweight Grand Prix for Brave, maybe I'm in the Flyweight Grand Prix for RIZIN. I know RIZIN has their next event May 5th, and Brave, I really don't know. They're gonna really start doing stuff after Ramadan since they're a Muslim-based promotion, and that will be more than likely in April. So I'm just waiting. I told both promotions that I'm not gonna be ready to fight until April, anyways, because I'm focused right now on helping Lazy Boy achieve the next win for UFC Mexico here in Mexico City. So I'm hoping in May that would be a proper training camp to where I kind of take these 2 months to get back in shape, ready, and then after Lazy's done, I can start focusing on myself all of April and hoping to fight May 5th for RIZIN. But again, we'll see. but I definitely want to get paid again and do more things because I'm trying to do more stuff adult wise, investing in things and hopefully doing stuff outside the MMA world that I can make money without getting punched in the face.
I can see that you have done lots of what's the word? Was it philanthropic work around Chicago, your home city, and
Mhm.
elsewhere in the US. So yeah, you are doing a lot of giving back to the community, so to speak, outside of the octagon.
I'm trying my best, and trying to do more of my foundation as well, but one day at a time. It's hard to juggle. We're men, we can't really multitask too much. So to juggling becomes a factor, but I'm starting to get a little bit better at it.
Any shout outs you'd like to give? And I imagine with a portfolio as big as yours, the list will probably be almost endless.
Yeah, well, it'd definitely be, twice as long as the interview. For me, well, shout out to sponsors. Everyone who's a part of my team know they're a part of my team, and everyone who supports me and the real fans, I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much. And this is why I always say, I can't do things by myself. And one of the things that I like to say all the time is we can rebuild together. We are Team Shorty because without anyone's help or support or whatever the case may be, even though I go into the cage by myself, it takes the pack of people to bring me inside that cage, whether I want to be inside there sometimes or not. I had that support. So, we work together. We are Team Shorty. So thank you for everyone helping me, and we'll see what happens for the next one. And I appreciate it. Hopefully you get to see some purple in your neighborhood coming soon.
Um, just on that, what I was in on the UK scene and even on the Irish scene, um, just one last question I have to ask you. What gyms and what fighters on our scene on our patch have you heard of? Do you know of?
So the bad thing, and this is no disrespect to the UK fighters, that I'm in the Middle East a lot, or even in Russia and
Okay.
different places. I don't know most fighters. Like I don't even watch most of the UFC events. Like I don't remember the last big one that happened. I missed the entire one. So most of the time I don't even watch fights as a general fan. I'm a fan of a lot, but most of the people, like if I look at a UFC card, for example, I will be like, oh, cool, I know this guy, or I've seen him before, but that's about it. I won't even recognize their name most of the time unless I've trained with them. So, no disrespect to any of the fighters from around the world, especially the UK, is I don't know anyone. So I can't really state, for example, unless I've trained with you, I more than likely won't remember. And sadly, even if I've trained with you, I probably don't remember you until you kind of bring it up to me because I get punched in the head way too much.
Mm.
So I'm starting to think CTE has become a real thing because I've seen people here at UFC Mexico that I trained with years ago, and given people age, they look different, have more hair or skinnier or fat or whatever the case may be. And I'm like, I have to stare at people like really like intensely for like 3 minutes, and I'm like, oh, what's up, man? How you doing? So it does take a while, but I'm a little special case. But overall, man. The one thing I can't say is to any of the fighters out there, again, make a name for yourself. Fight the big fights, fight the scary fights. Obviously, if it's up to your resume, don't just, shoot up to the sky, but go take the steps. Don't try to skip any steps. Go from there and fight the next guy in line. Do fights that make sense. I know we're in an era of social media and everyone wants these celebrity fights and the big paydays. Sure, I get it. But if you don't have the opportunity, dude, take those reasonable fights. Oh, you're a title contender, you gotta fight the other title contender, then cool. Fight that guy and prove that you can win that belt, or you should fight for the belt. Those are the fights you should. There's no skipping levels here. Yeah, I get social media and this person's more popular, that person's more popular, but fighters respect fighters. Real respect real, and they recognize real. So fight the big names, make a legacy for yourself, and trust me, when you make a name for yourself, not just myself, but the UFC will recognize you and be like, dude, this guy's done work. Bring him in. Bring him in. There's no question. Shut up. Bring him in.
Jose Shorty Torres, thank you so much for coming on the show. And that was very interesting. I've learned a lot from you.
I
A
appreciate it,
lot.
brother. Thank you.
Guys, thank you for watching and listening. If you're watching on YouTube, please don't forget to leave a like and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It really helps me when you do that. And don't forget you can catch the audio versions of this episode on Spotify, iTunes, and on Google Podcasts as well. Jose, thank you once again. Thank you. Take
Appreciate it,
care.
brother. Thank you, man. Cheers.
Take care.